Socially, there's always been a narrative that women are less skilled at video games than men. And even though my personal immediate take was that this isn't true, I've still always been curious about a statistical answer, so I found it. Since gender in gaming is a very sensitive topic, I expect a lot of the people who clicked on this video to already hate me. However, I ask that you give me a chance. I'll try my best to be as objective and unbiased as possible, since to me, this video is an opportunity to bridge a social gap that the gaming and specifically the League of Legends community have developed over the years. Are women bad at League of Legends? Yes. I'm kidding. But if your answer is actually yes off the top of your head, I think it's important to talk about why people, notably men, are inclined to think that in the first place. Well, first of all, the percentage of men who play video games is way higher than women, right? Wrong. According to this peer-reviewed article from 2019, women in recent years actually make up around half of gamers. So if there isn't actually a difference in the amount of men and women who play video games, why would this point still matter in terms of the social ideology that men are better than women? It's because there are still major differences, mainly in the type of games men and women tend to gravitate towards. These two studies show that on average, men are more likely to play competitive and violent games, while women prefer games with casual social environments. Expanded by the former article, men are reported to play, quote, violent games more than women, while also generally enjoying them more. This is determined by two factors, namely moral justification and anticipated enjoyment. In general, men approve of real-life physical violence more and expect more satisfaction and enjoyment from violence, both physical and virtual. They also anticipate feeling less guilty while playing because men are less empathetic than women. Because women anticipate the feeling of guilt more than men, they consequently play violent video games less or stop playing earlier. The latter article explains why women prefer casual gaming. It starts with the societal expectations placed on men and women respectively, ranging from when someone's parents encourage them to participate in activities associated with their gender, like playing with dolls or toy cars, to your peers or teachers in school, to the general media. Women are taught many characteristics that are communal, nurturing, kind, and sympathetic. Men are taught characteristics that are agentic, competitive, ambitious, and independent, leading to gender stereotypes like women being more suitable for careers that are like nursing and teaching. In this article study on whether there's a gender skill gap in MMO gameplay, it does seem as though at first glance, women and men tend to conform to real-life societal standards, with men playing for reasons oriented around achievement and women playing for reasons that are socially motivated. Women were also more likely to play supportive and assistive characters. On top of that, women prefer to play as female characters, as supported by this screenshot. A Riot dev confirmed that in 2022, 97% of female players exclusively played female champions. While that option seems less important to men since they only occupy a 50-50 split, in this peer-reviewed article, it shows that playing violent video games can result in an increase of violent behavior, which is added onto by using a character of the same sex. This further stretches the point that women don't like playing violent games because they tend to have less same-sex character options, and women also tend to stop their gaming sessions earlier than men when there is violence. If there is no option to play a female character, there's even less reason for women to play violent video games. Adding on to this, female characters are often overly represented in casual games as well, which ultimately contributes to this rift in experience even more. Because of the reluctance and apparent lack of interest that women have for playing violent games, they're also much less likely to identify themselves as gamers than men, since those same violent games are usually what define the gamer lifestyle. Returning to the original point of why the types of games each gender plays contributes to the narrative that men are better at gaming than women, the games that men play are naturally less preferred by women. With less of a female player base ratio in a game, a subconscious thought that would make sense to the majority, which in this case are men, is that they're better. While this assumption proves to be problematic, it seems to be a reaction that both men and women share. For example, male nurses often face gender discrimination by female nurses or patients and can be seen as unfit for the role of caregiving adjacent work. The next relevant point as to why women may be considered inferiorly skilled gamers to men is their lack of presence in professional esports. Statistically, at least 95% of pro esports is occupied by male players. This is further expanded on by Devin Nash, former CEO of Team CLG, who said this.
I've been in esports for almost a decade now. I ran 2 major esports teams, and I can tell you that the harassment and the difficulty of for women to be in gaming in general and esports especially is unbelievably hard, to the point where they're not welcome in gaming houses because they are seen as disrupting competitive integrity. There's an automatic judgment that gets made that a woman is going to be worse than a man at gaming.
In his professional opinion, the esports industry is inherently misogynistic. While he makes an interesting conclusion that I mostly agree with, I'll circle back to it later since I want to explain the reasons why I personally think that women aren't taken seriously in esports. While these takes won't be backed with peer-reviewed data, I feel like some things are just objectively true. First things first, all female teams. In the League of Legends scene, there have been a couple of instances of all female esports teams, the most well-known examples being Team Siren and Team Victus. While the point of creating them was to show that women can play just as good as men, they unfortunately ended up doing the opposite, and the damage done to the reputation of girl gamers as a whole was irreversible. Starting with Team Siren, this wasn't actually a professional team taking up an LCS slot. They were just 5 solo queue friends who ranged from platinum to diamond rank. This was semi-early League of Legends, so those ranks were actually really impressive in my opinion. However, it wasn't close to pro play level. Regardless, their existence in itself wasn't the issue. The issue was partially due to their iconic introduction video. This was Hall of Fame tier cringe, and I'm not even kidding.
The competition is fierce.
With millions of dollars at stake.
I'll bait you and outsmart you.
After that video racked up millions of views, the team was apparently only together for another 18 days before disbanding. In that time, they played ranked 5s, which was basically ranked flex, and only hit gold. And they also disbanded because of infighting, meaning that the all-female team that criticized the lack of women in esports at the time and advertised their future run for equality crashed and burned with a peak team rank of gold and drama between them, further perpetuating the idea that not only are women not as good as men, but they're too emotional to play competitive League of Legends. In the case of Victus, their performance was arguably way more detrimental to the image of aspiring pro-women gamers. This team was in the Russian league, and the 5 girls were only brought together because the original team disbanded and couldn't sell their slot. Assuming the abrupt backstory of their team, it was to no surprise that they sucked. They actually managed to set 2 world records in League Pro Play. The first one being in their second match they ever played, where they lost 52 kills to 2. The second one was the fastest lost ever, being a 13-minute match. With League games averaging 30 to 40 minutes over its lifespan, that's really bad. At this point, it's easy to tell that these 2 teams were just formed as marketing gimmicks. Unfortunately, their horrid performances and ironic dramas made aspiring female gamers be taken 10 times less seriously than they already were. My other point is one that might be more controversial, mostly because I think esports organizations would never publicly admit this if it was true. But having a girl on your team is most likely a liability. Think about the type of people that get scouted to be pro. They're usually young dudes who probably don't go out much, probably don't have complex social lives outside of League, and are definitely not used to living around women who aren't family. Because of this, I bet the chances of at least one player developing feelings for another would be high. This risk could cause obvious problems that would not only be based on performance in game, but just drama in general. Not to mention, most if not all serious League of Legends organizations have never had a female player, which means that the org that breaks the ice would probably have to restructure things and accommodate something that, while special, is unfortunately very foreign. This would probably be a hazard for a PR nightmare and is, from a business perspective, most likely not worth it. Based on the examples I've shown, the only thing that seems genuinely worth it as a business to actually give a woman a chance in LoL Pro Play so far is for the media attention, which in my opinion is for the wrong reason. The lack of women in esports is so detrimental because role models heavily impact the motivation of people to try their absolute best to succeed, highlighted with minorities, which women are in this case. As I preface though, what I've just said is based on my observations on the issue, so I could be wrong since I'm not an esports organization. Aside from this, some other attempts at spearheading this issue have reached social traction, but they were met with controversy. Now that I've shown why I think the idea that men are more skilled at video games than women is echoed throughout gaming and League of Legends as a whole, it's time to talk about whether that's actually true. To start, I'm going to look at this previously referenced peer-reviewed article that researched the idea of men having an inherent advantage at gaming biologically. However, they specifically looked into this while using an MMO as the gaming vessel between both genders. In this study, 2 different questions were posed. The first analysis was whether there is a difference in speed speed of character advancement between men and women. So in simpler terms, if there is a difference in level reached assuming both genders played for the same amount of time. The second question was if either gender was faster at going from one level to another, or in other terms, if one gender is more efficient at grinding XP. So what were the results? If both genders were given the same amount of time, on average, women played at least as good as men, with some performing better. However, men would on average level their character further than women, which is supported by other studies showing the reasons women may quit their gaming sessions faster than men. So women play at the same skill as men given the same amount of time, but tend to play less overall, which adds to the perception that men are better. Something that I found interesting to note is this article's mention of the stereotype threat theory, which is the theory that constant reminders of one's negative stereotypes that applies to their demographic will actually contribute to a higher likelihood of one conforming to them. In this case, the constant belief that men are more skilled at gaming than women likely lowers the motivation of women to play competitive games along with men. Even if the gender has nothing to do with a player's potential for skill, the stereotype can subsequently hinder the overall performance of women in competitive gaming. I think this information is really valuable, but what about League of Legends? I mean, MMOs are kind of easy games to play. Go kill 10 of these, go pick up 5 of those. What about a really competitive experience? Is there any difference there? These trials done in 2015 discussed this in compelling detail. In the first study, they examined a female player named Annie. She came in to play for 2 different sessions. In the first one, she was accompanied by her friend who was also her boyfriend's friend. The next session, she came with a female classmate of hers that was more new to League. Annie, up until that point, had mainly played support since her boyfriend was the person who introduced her to League, and they played bot lane together. However, she had been practicing mid and jungle when she was playing without him. When they interviewed her, she expressed her frustration that most women she knew who played League, if any at all, played support, and that she didn't want to be associated with the idea that she was being carried in ranked. In session 1, she ended up playing support, and when asked about her lack of typing in chat to communicate with her team, she expressed her lack of confidence in her shot calling, and that she preferred pinging. In session 2, Poppy, Annie's classmate, revealed that she was also introduced to League by her boyfriend along with her brother, and that she exclusively played League as support with her boyfriend. This observation aligns a lot with the previous studies I've mentioned where women seem to play supportive roles in competitive games. Conclusively, both Annie and Poppy refrained from typing in chat while the male participants didn't. In the second study, they wanted to see if these traits in both Annie and Poppy were relevant in the general female player base rather than some one-off cases. They set off to answer 6 different questions. Do male players play more on average than female players? Are male players more skilled than female players even with the same amount of matches? Are female players less confident in their skills compared to males? Is the ratio of female players who play with their significant others higher than those who don't? Are female players more likely to play support in general along with specifically when they play with a significant other? And finally, does playing with a significant other affect the skill of either male or female players overall? The answers to these questions were as follows. For question 1, they found that male players play significantly more than female players. Although playing more means you're more likely to get addicted, which I talk about in this video, so you should watch it once you're done with this one. In question 2, the results were that on average male players were more skilled, but comparing those men and women who played the same amount of matches, there were negligible differences, which suggests that both genders develop skill at the same rate, which aligns with the MMO study as well. In the third question, they found that there was a slight margin of less self-confidence and skill with women. However, the amount was pretty much negligible. In question 4, statistically 73% of female players played with a romantic partner at least from time to time. First of all, that is an insane number, and it just shows this social disconnect for gender in gaming, which I'll get into later, along with women reportedly playing with a romantic partner much more often than men, which makes sense again, but like I said, I'll expand on that more later. For number 5, they also found that not only do women play support more often, they are more likely to play support if they play with their partners. In the last question, they found that whether either gender played with their partners or not didn't affect their skill at all. While this data is years old, I think that it's still relevant as the league's player base growth has been pretty much linear over the years. Aside from how 70% of women play with a romantic partner, that one's most likely lower by now, at least in my opinion. These results pretty much still line up with the MMO study even though they're different types of games. The league document even references the stereotype threat theory as well. So what does this all mean? It means that the actual difficulty of a game doesn't contribute to the inherent difference in skill between men and women. Men on average are better at League of Legends, but it's because 1, there are more men who play League, and 2, men have been playing video games and League of Legends in general for much longer. However, a male and female player who've both been playing League for let's say 3 years have no difference in rate of skill acquisition or skill ceiling. But why does it matter if men have been playing video games longer overall? Well, because in the MMO study, they state that the more experienced gamers tend to adapt to a game's strategy more efficiently than inexperienced players, regardless of gender. On top of that, it's also shown that the gender-separated playstyles, like how women tend to play supportive roles, is likely not actually based on what gender you are, but how experienced you are. Women who have become familiar with a game are likely to swap to more assertive roles. So because women are less experienced in gaming, and how many of them are introduced to gaming by male friends or boyfriends, they'll for the most part gravitate towards supportive roles, which contributes to the misconception that women can only play support. Circling back to what former Team CLG CEO Devin Nash stated in his video's conclusion.
So if you're walking away from this video saying, well, what do I do with this information? The first thing you should do is you should not perpetuate the stereotype that women are worse in gaming for any other reason besides the fact that it is almost impossible for them to do it culturally.
I fully agree with him. Based on data, gender doesn't actually have anything to do with the potential skill of a player. So overall, what contributes to the cultural difference for women and men in gaming? Well, men have a much larger demographic in competitive video games. Because of this, men have more experience playing competitive video games and therefore assume more proactive roles on average. A casual example of this is how me and my friends from elementary school played Call of Duty, but none of my female classmates did too. And since console gaming is more new gamer friendly than PC gaming, gamers in League of Legends specifically suffer an even larger learning curve if it happens to be their first competitive video game they play, regardless of gender, compared to starting off playing on consoles when you were 12 before transitioning to PC gaming. This also means that one of the most likely ways a woman is introduced to League is through a male in her life, which a lot of the time seems to be a boyfriend. This then leads them to statistically play support instead of other roles at first, which contributes to that stereotype. Women also don't really have many, or in League's case, any female esports role models to inspire them. All these factors make it seem as though being a man makes you an inherently more talented gamer. The more people push this false narrative, the more the stereotype threat theory comes into play, lowering the confidence of minorities and in turn contributing to them seeming more involved in their respective negative stereotypes, in this case, women in gaming. Are women bad at League of Legends? No, they're inherently just as good as men, and hopefully this video can be a vessel to shed light on this issue. The more we support each other, the more competitive and fun League of Legends and gaming as a whole will become. Thank you so much for watching my video. I worked super hard on finding objective, unbiased information to come to an actual conclusion and finally answer this question. If you enjoyed watching, I'd really appreciate if you subscribed because it helps me a lot. And I'll catch you all next time. See ya!